Okay, so I'd really like to get started, and first I'm going to introduce our special programming speaker, Amanda Shy from CARE. CARE's CARE stands for Center for Advocacy, Response, and Education. They offer a variety of resources to Purdue students, such as putting on preventative programming like the one we have tonight, and advocacy services to help and support and empower students who have experienced interpersonal violence. CARE is a super important resource on our campus, so please listen, be engaged, and ask questions.
Thank you for the warm introduction. My name is Amanda Shy. My pronouns are she, her. I am the Prevention Programming Specialist over at the Center for Advocacy, Response, and Education. However, up until May, I was also a member of Purdue Student Government. I was actually where you guys were now as a Senator for Liberal Arts 2 years ago, and then ED of Diversity and Inclusion last year. So I'm really excited to be able to still be able to kind of be around and hang out and talk to you guys about things that I'm really passionate about, which just happened to be responding to disclosures of interpersonal violence today, right? So last time, if you remember, we talked about bystander intervention. The reason that we didn't do this one again, despite having some new faces in the room, is the fact that I think those of you who did already see it would kind of lose your mind at having to see it again. And I, more importantly, would lose my mind at having to see it again. So because you guys are peer leaders, you're pretty respected within the community, I would say. You do tend to receive more disclosures of interpersonal violence than other students might. The fact that you are in an executive position within a really reputed student organization might mean you hear disclosures a little bit more often than the average student. So today, this presentation is going to kind of break down how you respond in those situations. So today, just again, because interpersonal violence is a very heavy topic, the first expectation is that I would like you guys to take care of yourself. If you need to leave to go to the bathroom, get a drink of water, do whatever, just give me a thumbs up or make eye contact with me or something, because otherwise I will come out and check on you. This is a promise, not a threat. Just to make sure that you are doing okay, making sure that your well-being is our top priority here. Just make sure you take care of yourself. But also, I really would like you guys to be respectful of others. Dialogue and discussion is the #1 way to education, absolutely. So there's no wrong answer, no wrong questions, but just be please mindful of how you express those thoughts. So today, our learning objectives. The first one is to just understand the neurobiology of trauma and how it impacts the stress responses to someone who's experienced interpersonal violence, to distinguish between empathetic and sympathetic responses, as well as understanding the basics of active listening and how to practice those skills. And finally, we'll wrap it up by talking about the importance of self-care and kind of some of the ways that we can do that. So starting off with the neurobiology of trauma, raise of hands, who's familiar with the brain and its functions? Okay, good solid deal of you, I like that. So I won't go too deep into the detail on the brain. After all, I am a prevention programming specialist and not a neurobiologist, but still important to kind of know about the basics here. So within a trauma response, the 3 most important parts of the brain are the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, and the hippocampus. And the next couple slides are going to kind of break down what the significance of each of those is, what the roles are, and why it matters for trauma response. So the prefrontal cortex is mostly responsible for decision-making and planning, interpreting memories into stories, and attention control. In traumatic responses, we're most concerned about the decision-making and planning aspects of the prefrontal cortex. The amygdala is primarily responsible for emotional regulation and threat assessment and response. This will come in handy later. And finally, the hippocampus is responsible for storing and organizing new memories, connecting emotions to strengthen memories, as well as processing spatial memories, so where things are at a given location. The reason these parts are important and how they all kind of fit together is that when a trauma occurs, the amygdala recognizes that there's a threat. This is not a conscious override. This is not a conscious decision. You are not looking at your surroundings and going, yeah, that seems threatening. Your body is picking it up as a threat whether you want it to or not. You have no control over this part. When your body does identify a threat like that, when your amygdala does recognize that there's a potential threat, your prefrontal cortex activity gets suppressed. So that means your decision-making capabilities are altered. When people are in traumatic experiences, they most often go back to habitual behaviors because habits are so deeply ingrained into our brains that it is a lot easier for our brain in high-stress situations to respond with a habit, a learned behavior, than it is to practice something that we haven't used for the first time, like a self-defense course. And finally, the last step here is that the hippocampus activity is reduced. This is really important, especially when we think about how survivors are portrayed in pop culture, social media, things like that, is because the memory capabilities are altered here within interpersonal violence. So what that means is that when somebody's experiencing trauma, their hippocampus goes into hyperencoding. So their brain is memorizing as much of the information as it can, trying to code it all down because the brain is so stressed out. The thing is here is that your brain is really only paying attention to emotionally significant details. So this is where law enforcement and survivors of interpersonal violence can kind of disagree here, is because survivors often remember emotionally significant details. For example, if somebody is assaulted at gunpoint, they may remember the weapon itself, but they may not remember the person's face. This can be really frustrating in investigations because they are when we're doing a criminal investigation, a law enforcement is looking for centrally significant details, which are things like, time, place, location. And sometimes survivors just don't have the answers to that because the memories have been so scrambled due to the traumatic response. After that period of hyperencoding, your brain goes into an underencoding refractory period because it has just hyperencoded so much. So it's a lot of people who've experienced this kind of violence will often say that after this, it all goes blurry, it all goes fuzzy from there. And this is because their brain is just not able to take in any more memories. It usually takes about 2 days of that refractory period for people's hippocampuses to return to a normal encoding ability. So this factors into the stress responses then in how people respond to interpersonal violence. When somebody's in an experience, somebody is experiencing interpersonal violence, we're really familiar with the fight and flight responses, either running away from the danger or fighting the danger when we're too close. But what's actually much more common within responding to interpersonal violence is freeze and fawn. People who experience interpersonal violence are much more likely to freeze because the brain has recognized that there is no good outcome here. There is no way to run to escape the situation. There is no way to fight to escape the situation. And so when it is pinned in a rock and a hard place, the brain is doing the best that it can to protect the brain and the body. And by doing this, there's 3 different ways that freeze kind of manifests. The first one is tonic immobility, where your body is frozen effectively, but your mind is still active and engaged. There is dissociating, where your body is still in place, but your people will say they experience seeing things from an out-of-body perspective. Essentially, your brain force ejects. And then finally is collapsed immobility, which is like fainting, passing out. Again, this is not a choice that we get to make. When people are experiencing interpersonal violence, they are not choosing, I think I'm going to dissociate on this one. The brain, when it has identified that threat, it has already kind of kicked off the process. And again, going back to being in a rock and a hard place, your brain is doing the best that it can to keep you safe. Fawn is also included because it is a habitual response that a lot of people return to. It is the fact that sometimes when in a stressful situation, people go back to people pleasing, to saying yes in order to escape the situation, to appease the person who is potentially going to hurt them, so that way they can escape and live to see the next day. Some of the short-term effects of experiencing interpersonal violence can include things on the mental health, the behavioral health, and the physical health side of the world. So when we say short-term effects, we're talking within the first couple days and weeks following a experience of interpersonal violence, but this can still lead to some pretty severe effects. So things like substance issues, being withdrawn, depression, dissociation, anger, trembling, nausea, raised heart rate, anything like that. These are, again, really significant in the fact that when somebody does disclose interpersonal violence to you, they may not be themselves. They may be a little bit more distracted, more flighty than usual. They may be experiencing a lot of different changes right now. A lot of things are going through their mind. And so these are some other things to kind of take into account when thinking about how to respond to disclosures of interpersonal violence. The long-term effects. The reason that we have these highlighted is the fact that you'll notice there's a lot more of them. Over time, with or without a PTSD diagnosis, a lot of these symptoms can manifest in people who've experienced interpersonal violence, whether or not they consciously put a name to it. So within that, you can have issues such as insomnia, nightmares, increased substance use, depression, anxiety, fear responses, a sense of helplessness. These responses can last anywhere from a few weeks, a few months, to years, decades. It can be a lifetime, but more often than not, it can just be chronic. So next, empathy. It may seem a little bit silly to lecture you guys about empathy here, but obviously within dealing with a sensitive subject, and especially somebody who's in a vulnerable position, such as disclosing their interpersonal violence experience to you, empathy is really critical. So I'm going to show you guys a brief video that kind of highlights the differences between empathy and sympathy.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with "at least." Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
All right, so if you haven't heard of Brene Brown, she's the one who narrated that video. She has over 20 years experience looking into vulnerability, empathy, and shared connections with people. So she speaks from a place of deep experience when she's saying these things. So after looking at that video, what would be some examples of at least statements in responding to, or sympathetic responses, I should say, in responding to interpersonal violence disclosures?
Well, talking about fawning, you could be like, oh, well, at least it worked out in the end, so you were able to leave.
Totally, yeah. At least you made it out. At least you're okay. At least you're physically okay, right? Other examples of sympathetic responses? Yeah, totally. It could have been worse. That's a really great way to sum it up. I always use the rule of thumb of just the at least statements, and that's kind of where I slipped up there. But at least statements, like said in the video, are rarely helpful. With interpersonal violence, that's what a lot of people hear when they first disclose their story. You know, at least you're alive, at least you're not pregnant, at least you know somebody wants to have sex with you. And those can be really harmful. That can be really damaging to people to hear, you know, that like, oh, it could have been better. You're right, it could have been, but it could also have not happened. What would be some examples of empathetic responses?
Like, thank you so much for telling me how can I best support you during this time.
Absolutely. And you did such a great thing by reflecting the question back to them. Not only thanking them for their disclosure because it's something so deep and personal, but also saying, you know, how can I best support you? The reason why that's really important here is because in experiencing interpersonal violence, people have been already subjected to somebody else's power and control. The reason why it's really important that we give the power back is so that way they can take control of their lives. So that way we give them that power back, we give them that choice back, which is why it's important that we, again, put the choice back in their hands. How would you like me to best support you? Would you prefer I listen, or would you prefer I provide resources? Just some examples of ways to show somebody that you're listening and supporting them no matter what they've been through. 1 second. All right, active listening. Again, I know it feels a little bit like a kindergarten classroom, but the reason that we do this is, again, because while we say active listening and we hear this term a lot, it's not necessarily really talked about in how we respond to disclosures that are this heavy. So with active listening, we've got about 5 different steps or tips to kind of help you along. Cool deal, thank you. So one is to be attentive, pay attention to the story that the information that they're sharing with you, showing you're engaged, offering feedback, remaining open-minded, which is hugely critical here, and then asking any clarifying questions. And we'll kind of unpack those a little bit. So being attentive, how would somebody show you that they're being attentive?
They're not on their phone when you're talking to them.
Totally. And it's one of those things that it kind of hurts to have to say again, to be like, don't look at your phone, don't interrupt somebody if they're saying something that's really deep and personal. But it kind of just gets ingrained in us. And so I think that is a great way to show that somebody's actively engaged, is that they're not looking around, they're not checking the time, they're not checking their phone, their clock, their watch, their computer, anything like that. Totally. What would be some other ways that somebody would show that they're attentive? Yeah.
I'd say another thing is, like you said, not interrupting, but
Totally.
responding and saying,
Yeah.
oh, yes, or like,
Yeah.
or something like that.
Definitely. Yeah, you're touching on really good points in terms of the fact that, like, sometimes we don't have to have a full sentence really to even respond, but just showing somebody that we're at least paying attention to kind of fill in those gaps, to encourage them along and encourage them while they're sharing. Totally. Hugely important. I do want to highlight on this slide that, like, as we said, maintaining eye contact is also something that can show that you're attentive to what somebody is sharing with you. This is something that can either help or hurt, and that can be something to be mindful of. Some cultures prefer less eye contact. Some individuals prefer less eye contact, so just be mindful and generally mirror whatever the individual is expressing at that moment. Again, some of the points that we touched on in terms of showing you're engaged, showing you're attentive, mirroring their body language. So kind of showing whatever they're giving back to you. If they're closed off, maybe be a little bit more open though. Using verbal cues other than words, as we talked about, just showing that you're paying attention. And physical cues like nodding, smiling, making a facial expression. Don't just sit there and watch them. That would be really uncomfortable for everybody involved probably. Much more exciting this way. When we say offer feedback in terms of active listening, what we're not saying is to offer your 2 cents on the situation of what they've just experienced. We're not saying, oh, I wouldn't address like that personally, or like I wouldn't have gone out at 10 o'clock at night, but instead saying, do you want me to listen, or would you rather I provide resources? Do you want us to solve this problem together? So again, reflecting their emotions. If somebody's really frustrated, kind of feel that with them. For example, if somebody's struggling with academics after experiencing interpersonal violence, hey, you're talking to me about this project. It sounds like you're really, really stressed, and I can't imagine how frustrating that is, especially with having to deal with all of this stuff, internally as well. And so that really does sound hard to experience right now. Would you be interested in looking into academic accommodations with me? Would you be interested in academic accommodation resources? Things like that. Of course, like I said, it's always most important to ask for consent before giving advice, because again, we're trying to put power back into their hands. Yes?
I think another thing that's really important is not telling someone what to do, but instead, like you said, offering that feedback, because I know that when you tell someone what they're doing, they can feel very targeted. Yeah, definitely. That's such a great point. In addition to feeling targeted, people can also feel like they're kind of being pressured into making a choice. Like there's a wrong way to do these things, and maybe like if you don't take this resource, that you will not support them. And it can be really hard to support people who are also experiencing interpersonal violence just because of how complex it is. For example, it takes an abused partner an average of 7 tries to successfully leave an abusive partnership, just because of how complex these situations can be. And so again, it is really, really important to give that choice back to them, to not make them feel like they have to do something because they've just had that experience of their power being taken away. And again, this is why it's important that we're offering choices. We're also remaining open-minded. It seems like a really base thing to say here, but it is really important to note that judgment can be expressed pretty easily. Kind of like Brene Brown said in the video, if you don't necessarily believe somebody, believe that it's their truth. Believe that what they are sharing, that they believe in. And that's all you have to do. You are not the judge, jury, or executioner. You don't have to make decisions on if they're telling the truth or not. You just have to support them. Judgment can be shown through body language, facial expressions, what you say, what you do. So it is just nice. It is good to be mindful of top to bottom how you're interacting with somebody who's disclosing like this.
And then also ask clarifying questions. Again, when we're saying clarifying questions, I'm not saying, you know, like, where were you the night of August 27th? But I'm saying, like, are you okay? Are you physically in danger? It sounds like you're really stressed about school. Is it like going to class, or is it the assignments that are stressing you out? Things that help you understand their story, but not things that help you get any answers, right? Because again, what they're choosing to share is very personal, and so it shows a lot of trust in somebody when they disclose to you. And so that is really important to not lose that trust. So back to activities. I'll just have you turn to the person next to you, or groups of 3, whatever works, and just kind of take turns telling a story. Use this little scale on a rank it 1 to 5, how everybody's listening, but make sure you take turns. It can be something as simple as like your favorite memory, something you did today, your worst experience on the Boilermaker Express, whatever. But just take turns in sharing a story and listening. Make sure to give each other some feedback in terms of how active listening is working. And I'll give you guys about 5 minutes to do that. Can I ask you to hold on to this? Yes, of course.
Hello?
I'll give you guys another minute or 2 to finish up telling your stories, doing your trade and grade there. All right, let's come back together here. So as you guys are finishing up your stories, finishing up kind of expressing feedback about how the other one did, would anyone like to share what's something that their partners did really well that kind of showed that they were active listening? Yeah.
Maintaining eye contact and also offering comments to things that I said or that things that they
Yeah,
said.
totally. Yeah, you can offer that feedback. It wasn't like creepy, like non-blinking eye contact though, right? Cool. Again, that's what's really important here is that when we're saying eye contact, I don't mean stare somebody down, right? Still be normal, but maintain eye contact where normal. Anyone else? Yeah.
But you want to
Erica did a really good job of asking like clarifying questions, but particularly asking clarifying questions when there is pauses, because sometimes it can feel awkward if you do it in the middle of when someone's speaking. So
Yeah.
well timed.
Nice, nice. I like that. Yeah, really getting down into the nitty gritty. You know, there is definitely those pauses and flows in conversation. We're not just jumping in to be like, wait, actually what happened? I don't know what's going on. Please slow down. But we're waiting for that kind of lull in the conversation to then kind of take that chance to be like, I'm not really sure what we're getting at here. You know, is this what's really going on? Which is a really great strategy to take. That's awesome. Yeah.
I was very proud of Irene because she got a message and I was like telling my story. So she like looked at it and she was like psych, and then she put her phone back down.
Nice.
And listened.
Nice. I like that. I like the psych out. That's awesome. Yeah, no, I really like to hear how you guys are staying engaged. I really liked how deep your discussions were getting. It's always a good time to just be able to chat with the people that we spend, you know, ridiculous amounts of hour in a week with our organization with. All right. So one of our last kind of notes for the night, self-care. Why is it important? Why do you think I'm talking about self-care in a presentation on responding to disclosures of interpersonal violence?
It's really easy if you've been, you know, through a traumatic situation to forget about yourself and to forget to take care of yourself.
Definitely.
So it's nice to be able to say, hey, I should probably not do some of these really bad behaviors.
I like that, you know, kind of understanding your own mental health and setting boundaries then to be responsible with that. That's definitely something that's really important that gets kind of lost because sometimes when you want to help somebody who's going through something that's so serious, so vulnerable, you really want to be there for them for everything, but you can't forget to take care of yourself first. There is no person on this planet that is your responsibility aside from you, exception being children if you're parents, but you are not responsible for anybody else at the end of the day. Yeah.
I guess going a little bit deeper, my big thing is like you can't fill someone else's cup if yours is empty.
Great point.
And so just using that metaphor.
Yeah, definitely. That is a great way to go about it. Again, you cannot help somebody if you need help yourself. You have to be you have to be at a point where you're able to take care of other people before you can start offering those services. Anyone else? Yeah.
Just one more metaphor that I personally really like
Love
on
it.
this train of things.
Yeah.
It's the airplane metaphor of when the masks come down, put yours on before you help the person next to you.
Absolutely, absolutely. The cup, the airplane mask, it's the same. It's getting at the same thing. You have to take care of yourself before you can take care of another person. Otherwise, you're kind of giving, you know, half help, which can actually be more of a detriment than it can be a benefit to somebody going through this. Another reason why we talk about self-care at the end of this presentation is the fact that when you receive a disclosure of interpersonal violence, whether or not you personally have experienced that kind of violence or any violence adjacent to it, it can still be really heavy, you know? Like to have somebody explain something that is so important to them, that is so impactful to their life and how they act in day-to-day life, that can be really hard to handle, especially if we have a lot of responsibilities, a lot of schoolwork, a lot of disclosures even. Those can kind of stack up. And so it gets really important that you make sure to take care of yourself because it can actually lead to secondary trauma and burnout in yourself. Raise of hands, how many people have heard of compassion fatigue? Okay, about half and half. So compassion fatigue is kind of where you care so hard that you tire yourself out. And so if you are caring for all of your friends with your whole heart, you're putting all of your energy into your clubs, your academics, your jobs, and things like that, there's nothing left for you at the end of the day. And that can make it you kind of experience symptoms that are akin to experiencing the trauma yourself. So things like being withdrawn, being depressed, anxious, irritable, those can kind of be signs that somebody is experiencing some form of self-care or needs some self-care, is kind of experiencing that compassion fatigue. So what I'd like to hear from you guys is how do you guys take care of yourself? What are your favorite ways for self-care? Do we do self-care, first of all? I'm not liking the faces I'm seeing. Your assignment tonight is to do self-care. That's the only homework I'll ever give in a workshop. But in an ideal world, if we did self-care, how do we do it?
in the ideal situation in which self-care is something that's regularly done, I personally really like going outside, enjoying nature, going on a hike, and just kind of being alone with my thoughts, but also being able to focus on things.
Yeah, nature is a great, really healing experience for a lot of people to kind of get distance from your thoughts, from all the technology that we've got. Not to sound like I'm 80, but sometimes it's nice to get away from all of that for a little bit. Yeah.
I think a big part is also like physical health, and so a lot of people go to the gym to do so. And then, like you said, disconnecting from the world and just taking time, not have everything thrown at you like the world does now.
Definitely. Taking care of your body is a great way to actually do self-care. It seems like it's, right in the name there, but it is the basic form of self-care. It works really well. Yeah.
One really easy one that I like to do is before you go to bed every night, think of just 3 things that you're grateful for.
Yeah, totally. And I really like that strategy because it kind of makes it a little bit more bite-sized. Like you don't have to journal, you don't have to like take a bath with nice bath bombs, you don't have to get yourself a nice meal. You just have to think about nice things that happen in your day. Yeah.
I know for me, I can get like depression room building up with like my living space very easily. So I think one thing that I like to do is on my like weekly like scheduler planner, I'm like, okay, on Saturday or Sunday, I'm gonna take at least 30 minutes and like maybe clean out this corner of my room. Or if I'm, really feeling it, I will like, clean out my bathroom. And just the act of like taking care of your living space makes you feel like you've accomplished something, and it kind of just picks you back up and having like a clean space to work in.
Totally. And I love the fact that you make sure that your self-care is so targeted to your specific needs there. Like you recognize the fact that things can get kind of built up over time, and believe me, I hear that. But like you're also taking that step to, recognize that, hey, this is kind of an unavoidable thing, but here's a way I can make it better for myself. And here's a way I can keep myself from getting extra stressed out while I'm already stressed, Yeah. Yes. In the back. Yeah.
I journal every night, or at least I try to. And
Awesome.
it's a habit that I've been trying to get back into recently. And I also try to set aside like a couple hours every week, because I'm in a club sport that's like very physically demanding.
Totally.
But it alleviates like so much of the stress that I build up that it just helps so much. So I make sure to like set time aside for that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so glad to hear that you make that time for yourself, because journaling is really nice. That's a really great way to kind of help with your stress as well, because it's a way to put down all of your thoughts without worrying about what other people are going to say, think, do, and then you get to close it at the end of the day. Your thoughts get contained, they are put somewhere else, and then you can go right back to them whenever you'd like. Yeah.
One thing that I really like to do is go to like a restaurant or something by myself and just people watch.
I like it. I like it. I like it. I like that you're admitting it. Not enough people do admit it. I'm also one of those, so I hear that. You are seen, you're valued. Yes.
I think that something that I really try and do, which is pretty small but still important, is leave myself enough time to get to classes, and also like when I'm getting to classes, like listen to music and don't think about like the actual class, but kind of just give myself even that like short like 10 to 15 minutes to kind of just like focus on like just listening to the music and enjoying being outside.
Yeah. I really like to hear that you're like incorporating it into your daily routine. You're finding those moments that are a little bit more private, that where you can make that space. You already have to walk to class, so why not enjoy it? Why not make it a more beneficial experience? I do the same thing on my drive to work. Turn off your thoughts, ignore your phone, just kind of be present in the moment. Think about things that are not work, Yeah.
Mason reminded me of like something I do, except for mine's like a lot less wholesome. At the end of the day, I have a hard time like shutting my brain off, as I'm sure we all can relate to, especially being college students. But like at the end of the day, when I know like it's time for me to like settle down to go to bed, I play a game of euchre.
I love it.
Like on my phone.
I love it. No, totally. I could not tell you the amount of times I've downloaded, undownloaded, re-downloaded any sort of like on phone gambling app, just because I'm like, ooh, I can click cards. Low stakes, really fun that way. Thank you guys so much for sharing. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I just wanted to say one that I think is pretty important. I think documenting progress is really important because I think you kind of just see where you are and you look at yesterday and you haven't really grown much.
Totally.
But if you look at where you started from the beginning, you've grown a lot.
Yeah, no, I think that's such a great thing to think about, because not a lot of people do. You see a lot of people taking like before and after pictures of like their bodies before, like they really start working out, dieting, anything like that, to kind of show that physical proof. But I think it is really significant to show that mental proof as well. Like you have had some really deep lows, I'm sure. But letting yourself know that you've made improvements. Maybe one day what would have triggered you or upset you is something that, you kind of learned to self-soothe over time. That's really important. And again, thank you guys so much for sharing. It's so great to hear that you guys are making at least thoughts about self-care. Would love to see you guys practice them just a little bit. We don't have a lot of time in our lives as college, or you don't have a lot of times in your life as college students. No longer me, thank you. But it is still just a really critical piece, and that's a really critical piece to remember, especially when experiencing disclosures of interpersonal violence. All right, so that's kind of wrapping up our presentation. I'm going to give you guys a quick rundown of CARE. Raise of hands, who has heard of CARE before tonight? I love to see it. Awesome. So CARE is a Center for Advocacy, Response, and Education. We are Purdue's 100% confidential interpersonal violence support for Purdue students. This also extends if you have not directly experienced interpersonal violence, but have indirectly experienced interpersonal violence, whether somebody has disclosed to you and you don't know how you handled that situation, you're just stressed on their behalf, anything like that. We are here for you. We can help discuss rights and options. We have a 24/7 hotline, academic assistance we can get students in contact with. We help with protective orders and referrals to medical care and counseling, as well as accompaniment to police and Title IX investigations. We don't do any of that in-house. We focus on referring out. We also have prevention education, as Izzy pointed out. We have workshops like the one we have today. We have a couple others that you guys have still not seen yet, if you can believe it. But we also have some outreach events. The easiest way to stay up to date with what we're doing is on our social media. CARE at Purdue on our Instagram. I personally, I know the social media manager very closely. It's me. And she would really like if you followed. She would really like that. Anyways, but yeah, so we do also have prevention opportunities on campus, education, and if you are interested, we have volunteer opportunities as well if you're really passionate about preventing interpersonal violence. So with that, thank you guys so much for paying attention. I would love if you guys would scan this post-survey option to kind of follow up on your responses from the pre-survey, just so we can kind of keep track of what we are doing well, what we're not doing well, and how we can keep improving our programming going forward. Yes.
Are the workshops you do just for like organizations like this, or are they a thing that individuals could also sign up for?
You could totally request an individual workshop if you wanted to. We do mostly classrooms and organizations, but definitely there would be nothing stopping you. I would be happy to present one-on-one. We also do custom workshops as well. If there's anything that you don't see on our website currently, but you'd really like to learn more about, I'd love to do a deep dive, and I would be happy to do that. With that, I will throw up our contact slide. This has all the information about how to get in contact with us, and I'll also open up the floor to any questions. But I also know you guys are filling out a QR code. Yes.
Obviously, if we see someone that probably we can tell because of body language or whatever it is, has something going on, we don't want to force it out of them by any means, but what would you recommend is the best way that we can go about helping them besides just saying, like, I'm here for you?
Totally.
Because if they're not comfortable, I don't.
Right.
If I was in the situation, I wouldn't want to say, hey, like, I signed you up for a session or whatever. Like, that's.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great thing to think about. It can also feel kind of frustrating for us as the support person to just be like, I'm here if you need it. I know I like to have more direct action than that, so I can totally hear where you're coming from. If you're kind of seeing the signs that somebody is struggling with like their mental health, they may have experienced something traumatic, whether there's a lot of context clues that can kind of point to that. You don't necessarily, obviously offering support and help is a great start. Something else, again, you do not have to personally experience interpersonal violence to seek resources. CARE is 100% confidential. So if you have resources or maybe a friend who doesn't want to go to CARE themselves, we can provide resources for you to hold on to. Again, like we touched on earlier, you never want to force someone to take a resource, and that can also be frustrating to kind of hear that they're in a situation that they're in trouble in, but not necessarily seeking help. It's really important to remember, again, everyone's lives is their own, and there's not much we can control outside of our own life at the end of the day, but being there and being supportive is the most important piece. If you don't necessarily know what their trauma is, again, just kind of suggesting resources potentially, being mindful, accommodating their schedule if you can, if you're in a position to do so, things like that. Yeah. Any other questions on interpersonal violence, CARE, State of the Union? Yeah.
I don't know why I'm press the button. What are some of the best ways for PhD to interact with CARE, to get involved with CARE, to work on policy with CARE?
definitely. So something that we're working on throughout the course of the semester is kind of doing focus groups to kind of pilot out our workshops to find what's really engaging students, what's really not. If you're interested in that side of the world, we'd love to hear from you. Doing workshops, always fun. Never upset to get a request from you guys. But in terms of legislation, that is a little bit more difficult. You guys did some really great action last year in terms of getting CARE more resources and attention on the university level, and so we really appreciate all of the help that was done on PSG's side. It's hard to say what additional changes would need to be made. We're interested in liaison positions, so people to stay in contact between your organization and CARE, so that we can stay up to date on your updates. Your organization can stay up to date on our updates, fun things like that. In general, again, following our CARE social media will be the best way to see what events we have coming up. Believe me, I know the person who will also do outreach for events. It's me, and she will be reaching out. But if there's any events I haven't reached out for, please let me know. Any other questions? I will also be hanging outside a minute. My email is just ashie@purdue.edu if you have any questions that you don't necessarily want to air out in front of everybody. But other than that, thank you guys so much for paying attention. Hope you have a great rest of your Senate session.
Okay, hello and welcome all. At 7:55 p.m., I will now call this meeting to order. If you are a visitor, please state your name and your reason for being here.
Marco Luna from the Purdue Exponent.
David Hickey, Purdue Exponent.
Great. We will now begin with proxy reports. If you are a proxy, please state your name and the senator you are proxying for at this time.
Point of order. I believe we have one senator who needs to be confirmed. Do you want to do this now or do you want to do it later?
Correct. Let's do this now.
Okay.
All right, just repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Lucas Joseph.
On this 14th day of September 2022.
On this 14th day of September 2022.
Swear to abide by and uphold.
Swear to abide by and uphold.
The Constitution and the bylaws.
The Constitution and the bylaws.
Of the Purdue Student Government.
Of the Purdue Student Government.
I swear to conduct.
I swear to conduct.
All legislative business.
All legislative business.
With the utmost integrity. And with the best interests of Purdue University and its student body.
And with the best interest of Purdue University and its student body.
As my main objectives.
As my main objectives.
Congratulations.
Okay, now we will move into proxy reports. If you are a proxy, please state your name and the senator you are proxying for at this time.
My name is Mason Merkel. I'm proxying for Braden Kirkendall.
My name is John Vanetti. I am proxying for Sam DeLucia Green.
Perfect. Okay, hearing no more proxies, we will now move into roll call by Secretary Friend.
Senator Ferguson.
Here.
Senator Mariani.
Here.
Senator Hampton.
Here.
Senator Terrell.
Here.
Senator Scooter.
Here.
Here.
Senator Brown.
Here.
Senator Wheeler.
Here.
Senator Dodona.
Here.
Senator Bottini.
Here.
Senator Ackerman,
Here.
Senator Eskunis,
Here.
Here. Guzman. Here. Senator
Here.
Senator Johnson,
Here.
Senator De Silva,
Here.
Here. Here.
Okay, we will now move into Purdue's land acknowledgement. Purdue student government acknowledges the traditional homelands of the indigenous people, which Purdue University is built upon. We honor and appreciate the Potawatomi, Delaware, Miami, and Shawnee people who are the original indigenous caretakers. Now we will all rise for the Senator Pledge of Purpose. Okay. Our purpose is to be You guys sounded so good. Okay, the minutes for the last meeting were distributed to all via SharePoint. Are there any corrections to the minutes at this time? All right, seeing none, the minutes are approved as distributed. Okay, we will now move into executive reports. President Jensen, do you have any executive reports at this time?
I do. All right, so update on the one-stop shop app. So currently we're in the talks about what requirements that we're looking for as a university. So pretty much what we would like to include in that. Right now there's class schedule, bursar, financial aid, campus resources, but also asking you guys what resources you guys would want to see on there or what things you guys would like that to include, whether that be dining menus and such. So reach out to me with what requirements that you guys would like to include. Those are getting turned around really quick, so in the next about week and a half, we need to turn those requirements in. Fall retreat is this Saturday, so fill out the final RSVP form. Even if you're not going, we just want to know what numbers that we have. Some questions that have been brought up, what to bring. And so I put a PDF in Slack of what they say to bring to the camp. Wi-Fi, so in the lodge there's Wi-Fi, but not in the cabins. And then homework and studying. So if you're attending, all PSG hosted events are mandatory, and then I would strongly recommend that you attend the group sessions, as this is why we're having a multi-org retreat, is to network and connect with the other orgs. There's also 7 hours of free time already built into our schedule, and you're able to use that however you'd like, whether that be doing the programs that we're working with the other orgs, or whether that be doing your homework and stuff. But at the end of the day, take care of yourself. We just went through the presentation at the beginning, talking about, as I said, you can't fill others' cups if yours is empty. So if you want to take that time for yourself and take that time to do homework, then feel free to do so. I'm also doing Abademi's updates. So Headshot Night is next Wednesday at 8 p.m. at BOD. And so these are used for the website, and you can also use them for personal use, whether that be on LinkedIn, your Instagram, other social media platforms that you want to use that on, feel free to. And verbatim, as Abademi says, pull up, look nice.
Okay. I know we tried the virtual voting system in caucus and it was a little bit shaky, but we're still going to try it tonight with Bill 21. And if you still can't get onto the SharePoint or for some reason your vote isn't pulling up on the spreadsheet, please come see me after Senate and we're going to try to get that all worked out. In addition to that, I'm going to be sending out a food preference form in the next few days for our next Senate session. You don't have to fill it out, but if you would like caucus dinner next time, make sure you do. But I'll send out reminders and stuff in the Slack, so I guess it's not too pressing at the moment. Other than that, that's it from me. Do I hear any other executive reports at this time? Georgia.
We met with representatives from LIFT today, and they pretty much laid out a bunch of different options that are present at other universities. So They pretty much laid it out for us, and we just have to decide what we want to do. Like, do we want to move on with like half off Ubers, or do we want to like specify with like $5 to $6 off every Uber within a certain geofence? So we're working on further communication with them, but things are looking good.
Pro Tem Dodona.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone who came for the Senate check-ins. I know it was really valuable for Izzy, Lily, and I to have those conversations with you all. There will be an FAQ document coming out, because I think some of you had really great questions, and we want to make sure that everyone has access to those answers. So particularly concerning Senate duties, an FAQ will be coming out regarding those. Additionally, this is something that the committee chairs know about, but it is going to include all of Senate. There is some sort of intention to write some legislation that focuses on Senate's agenda and goals for the semester and year, and we want to include some of the things that you all said during your check-ins within those. So look out for some legislation within the next week or so that sort of summarizes both what the committees are doing as well as your all personal goals, and then idealistically it'll be something that is authored by every single senator, because every single senator will be participating in it. So if you have anything that you really want to be included, or you're worried about something else, reach out to Lily or I.
Pro Tem Ferguson.
Yeah, and then one last thing from us. Once you guys have your SAMs decided, if you could please send me an email with their names and their emails so that we could get them added into all communication and just have them more solidified in the roster.
Any other executive reports? Okay. Seeing none, we will now move into committee reports, starting off with internal affairs.
Not too much from internal affairs this week. Our committee started working on kind of not overturning, but updating and maintaining our Senate standing rules. It was a project that was started last year in IA. So kind of looking at the comments that were made last year, making some of our own, and then beginning to make those updates. So hopefully that should come through fairly soon. But governing dockets changes take a little bit, so keep you updated.
Financial affairs.
Yeah, we are excited to get the budget on the floor for the second week in a row. Hopefully, discussion will be not quite as colorful as last time. But yeah, other than that, we've been working with Mike Mifflin at SAO to try and get the small grant program up and running. So the hope is to have it going and application open by Monday, but don't take my word on that. I'm heeding his advice and following the philosophy, we won't open it until we're 100% ready. We are changing the structure of the small grants a little bit so we can try and shift it from being entirely reimbursement based to fronting more money for student orgs, because that's really the point of the grant. So some of the smaller orgs that don't have money can put things on. So I'm really looking forward to future discussions about that.
Campus and student resource affairs.
I was ready this time. Last time you were like, hello? So we actually, honestly, I think we had a great meeting. We kind of narrowed down what each member of my committee, what they wanted to really focus on and take point on. And I think it's more successful to divide and conquer than to think we're just gonna show up as a herd of CSRAers to every event or whatever we're trying to work on. Also really excited, we got 2 new committee members. So my little bundle has just grown into a whole bouquet, and I'm just excited about it. So,
university academic affairs.
Yeah, so we had a good meeting. We're meeting with Jeffrey Elliott next week, and just going to talk to him about potential projects he wants us to do and what we're planning to do for this semester too, and seeing if he can help us with that. The majority of the time we talked about an event that we want to do, a tabling event where we want to have students just come in and ask questions and put questions in a box or whatever, and then meet up with the new president and ask him those questions. It's a lot of planning. We're still in the beginning process, but we're even thinking of asking those questions and doing a podcast with him or a YouTube video, something like that, just so then we know what his plans are for his presidency and what he expects to see from us. So,
yeah, it sounds cool. Are there any ad hoc committee reports? Pro Tem Dodona?
Yeah, so in terms of SAFER, we had the last 2 weeks of meeting, and I recently met up with RHA, who we're going to do an event with that we similarly did last year called the Consent Tea Party. The current plan for it is to be done October 5th in Kroc Lobby from 6 to 8. It's going to have participation, ideally from a bunch of different organizations on campus, to talk about different elements of consent and sexual violence on campus. So if anyone's interested in coming or helping, we're always looking for new members or people who just want to help out.
Senator Bowman.
Yeah, so for the Disability Ad Hoc Committee, I guess this is a question for Evan. For the boiler update form, I submitted our interest flyer for it. I know that the form has was down or had some issues. I guess I'm just wondering what the status of that is.
So the boiler update is having a little bit of issues right now. Waiting on some approvals from Purdue in order to start sending that out. So come talk to me after Senate and we can get that.
Perfect, thank you. And just kind of a follow-up with that, I did have somebody reach out to us about interest in that, so that's wonderful. And if any other senators are also interested in joining the committee, well, you know where to find me.
Any other committee reports at this time? Okay. Seeing no more committee reports, we will now move into informal discussion. Do I hear any informal discussion at this time? All right. Seeing none, we will now move into old business. Do I hear any old business at this time? Okay. Seeing none, we will now move into new business. Do I hear any new business? Senator Terrell.
I motion to bring up Bill 2221.
Second.
Okay, it has been properly moved and seconded to bring up Bill 2221, the 2022-2023 budget. This bill is amendable and debatable and requires a majority vote. We will start with discussion from the authors of the bill and then move into discussion from the floor. Yes, Senator Iskinas.
So I'm basically just going to talk about the changes we made from last session because we already talked about all of the bigger changes. But the big thing that happened last session was we decided to take $3,000 from the fall 2022 conferences and retreats budget, specifically the fall retreat line, and disperse that between some of the BOD committees, BOD discretionary, and the Senate Standing Committee. So that was $1,000 dispersed across the standing committees for Senate, $1,000 to BOD project discretionary, and then $1,000 dispersed across 4 different BOD budget line items. So that would leave the fall conferences and retreats budget line at $2,000. And then we moved some other money around. We reduced the communications budget from $1,350 to $850, and the SP&A budget from $1,000 to $500, and moved that $1,000 to cabinet discretionary. So those are the only changes that have been made since last session, and I'm confident that the budget is in a place where we can pass it tonight.
Do I hear any other discussion? Pro Tem Dodona.
I believe this is a question for President Jensen. Considering we're still moving forward with the retreat, exactly where in the budget is the rest of that retreat money coming from?
That'll come from my budget. That's just a little quick answer. Is that satisfying?
The President's initiative, just to clarify?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Pro Tem Dodona.
So this is sort of in the same vein of the budget, but I just wanted to ask, I think it's particularly for Treasurer Wiseman, considering some of the concerns on the budget and its processes moving forward, how can all PSG members from all branches ensure proper procedure when it comes to expenditures?
What aspect of expenditure? Or can you just be a little more specific?
The processes.
No.
I'll get chair recognition. I guess my question is, I know that there were some concerns with summer expenditures and proper procedure being followed. I know there were some concerns with senators not feeling like they got all the information, and I know that like in terms of money and making sure the procedures are followed, sometimes I feel like it's unclear from all branches exactly how to do it. And so I guess in the vein of talking about the budget, I wanted to sort of clarify, like, how can everyone in this org make sure we're following procedures when it comes to money? And like, yeah, I guess that's it.
Thank you for the clarification. If you go onto our SharePoint homepage, across the top there is a financial resources tab, which I guess, I don't know how many questions it answers about spending money, but I tried to do like a little FAQ. It's a little different this year because we had everything have APFs last year. So there are a couple forms in there. If you don't have an APF, you can submit receipts in there, and then there's ways you can purchase things. With the fiscal guidelines, once they are approved by SAO, there's a very nice chart in there about the flow of approvals. I would love to have more conversations about that flow to make sure that we know the flow is being followed, and it's not, well, my committee chair said I could spend this, and then they send me the receipt.
Yes.
And I would also like to volunteer financial affairs and helping out with some of that stuff. I know once the small grants gets underway, we'll have significantly less work, and so that's definitely an initiative we can focus on this year.
Would anybody like to allocate some time to Treasurer Wiseman? Oh, that's right. Yep.
I just also wanted to say, like, if you're unsure before spending money, please email me or Slack me or ask questions.
Pro Tem Dodona.
Just one more question. So in our governing documents, it makes it pretty clear that any interpretation on the budget is up to the discretion of the Senate. How do you plan to, within your role as treasurer, ensure that that interpretation is being heard when things get unclear?
Yeah, so hopefully, again, this can be a partnership with financial affairs. I don't expect them to oversee every payment and expense that comes in, but if they are reviewing the budget and are curious about a distribution or an allocation or an expenditure in general, I'm happy to have those conversations.
Do I hear any other discussion? All right. Seeing none, we will now move into a vote on Bill 2221. We are going to do a placard vote first, and then we will move on to the SharePoint vote. So all those in favor, please raise your name placards. Okay. All opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? All right. Okay. Now we're going to move into the SharePoint voting. So you guys all should know how to get there. You go into the home page, and then under Senator Meetings. Yes, Senator Bowman?
For what's the legislation number? Do you want us to type 22-21 or just 21?
Just 21. I got you. Okay, well, as you guys can see from our screen here, with the vote of 19 to 0, Bill 2221 passes. Congratulations to the authors. Okay. Do I hear any more new business? Okay, seeing none, we will now move into announcements. Do I hear any announcements at this time? Senator Terrell.
This isn't related to Senate, honestly, or PSG. I'm sure you guys may or may not have seen my Slack message, but I'm helping my coworker raise awareness for the Taste of Purdue that's happening this Friday. It also has occurred to me that even if you don't want to go eat the fast food like catering, you could very easily just donate money to Make-A-Wish, which is what it's for. That's why I'm involved. So if anyone is interested in either getting a ticket so they don't have to like wait in line, because the line gets like kind of aggressive, I do have some of the cards, and once you show me either like the Venmo confirmation or just give me cash, I'll give you an actual ticket so you can just go in instead of waiting in line. Additionally, if you just want to donate to make a wish, like without the ticket, I can also provide the Venmo, so you can do that if you're interested. So have some good food or fast food, and donate for a good cause. So thank you. Great. You have a question, Michael?
Yeah, quick question. So if we're not able to make it, but we want to like donate, are we able to like donate a ticket? Like, is that a thing that we can do to like somebody that needs it or anything?
Yeah, like if you just wanted to pay like the $5 or any amount, $5 or above, to get a ticket, and then you just wanted to like give it to someone that you knew might not have the money to donate but would benefit from the meal, you can more than welcome do that. It doesn't matter. I know some other people that have done that, so it's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Any more announcements? Pro Tem Tadana?
Just real quick, I put it in the Senate channel, but when we're not doing caucus dinners, I think that some of us are going to go out afterwards to get food. So if you're interested, stick around and have a lively debate about where we should go.
All right, any more announcements? All right, seeing none, we can move into Senate snaps for, oh wait, I'm so sorry, President Jensen. Oh, okay. Go ahead, start us off.
Snaps to all of you for doing the online Senate voting. That's something that we were trying out this summer, as well as the Senate attendance, trying to move it to a more fast-paced and a quicker transition to the online form. So thank you guys for doing that. And we're still working on it, so please bear with us if there's any kinks as well.
Senator Yaskinis?
Snaps to FA, Sean, and Andrew, because we got that budget passed finally.
Senator Bowman?
Senate snaps to Senator Mariani for experiencing Olive Garden with me for the first time.
Any more snaps? Senator Mariani?
I'd like to give a snap to Senator Bowman for the same reason.
Senator Terrell?
I would like to give a non-Senate snap to Mr. Merkel for reminding me that it's Doug Dimmadome, not Dale Dimmadome.
Yep, Pro Tem Friesen?
Senate snaps to Gabby for being so on top of getting the other two pharmacy senators. Appreciating all the work you're doing.
Nicely done, Gabby. Senator Brown?
Snaps to the proxies for going out of their way and coming out tonight.
Senator Yaskinis?
And snaps to Senator Merkel officially for running it back one last time.
Do I see any more snaps? Senator Robinson?
So I want to give snaps to Senator Yax because he's not here. He actually I think he had a surgery this week. So I just want to make sure that you guys are all thinking about him. Maybe send him a message. Hope he's all doing well.
All right, seeing no further announcements of snaps, the chair would recognize the motion to adjourn. Senator Terrell?
Madam Chair, I motion to adjourn.
Second.
It's been properly motioned and seconded to adjourn the meeting. It is not amendable, it is not debatable, and requires a 2/3 vote. All in favor, please raise the placards. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.